All right, so hello.
Hello.
What is your real name and what do you really do?
So my name is Frank Tino. I'm the Director of Product Development, which means I am responsible for the engineering team, which consists of about 35 developers and about a dozen or more QA folks, and the operations team, which are the people that run the software in our data centers, about another dozen or so folks. So all in 50 to 60.
Okay. And coming into this process of, this Open Agile Adoption process, Frank, what's your Agile experience coming into this? Your role is relatively new as we do this together, right?
Yep. So I had been practicing Agile principles for a long time, probably mid-90s. I didn't know what to call them. I didn't prescribe a name to them. But once I did learn of Agile and Scrum through, of course, the famous Sutherland Schwaber book with the colors on the front, I took it to a startup I was doing in 2008. So that was sort of my first kind of official following a lot of the Scrum processes. And then took it with me to a larger organization where I was the chief technology officer, and then brought it with me to where I am now.
Okay. Had you ever used invitation or the opt-in concept before?
Never. So I was what I would call very prescriptive. In the 2008 experience, I read the book, internalized it, went to the team and said, "Hey guys, I read a book, and here's the playbook, and here's how we're going to track our time in the burn down charts, and we're going to have these meetings, and here's how long they're going to be." And I was also the Scrum Master, or acting Scrum Master in that capacity.
Oh, and you were their boss at the time?
I was their boss at the time too.
Okay.
And so that adoption was pretty good. It was a small team. It was a very good team. And I became emboldened by the success. And so when I took it to my second opportunity to get a much larger organization, I said, I'm just going to do this again. And so I laid out the playbook and said, again, here's exactly how we do it. And again, served initially as Scrum Master, although eventually found somebody else authorized in the organization to take over when my responsibilities took me elsewhere, and really had mixed results, to be honest with you. I think in the beginning people were like, okay, he's the boss, we're going to do what he says, and they sort of followed the playbook. But I noticed that as I sort of said, okay, great, we got some success, I'm going to go kind of focus on higher level business issues, the engagement level, the productivity really backslid pretty significantly. And I couldn't quite understand why. I mean, I said I did doing the same thing at this place they did the last place,
right,
telling people what to do. I really didn't want to get back into rolling up my sleeves and directing the teams the way I had been. So when I came to where I am now, I was looking for a better way. I really liked the Agile principles. I liked a lot of the productivity gains I had observed, especially with my first experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like, if I do the same thing again at this place as I did at my last place, I'm probably going to have similar results. So I was looking for a different approach to getting teams and organizations to adopt Agile in a way that really made it stick. And so I spent a fair bit of time kind of researching the different coaches in the area and going to a bunch of conferences and trying to understand what might an approach be that would have better results.
Right, and then you went to a public user group meeting and there was a heretic there.
There was.
Right. So had you ever been to Open Space before we did this together?
Never heard of it.
Okay, never heard of it. That's so interesting. Okay, so you and I worked together. You brought me in as the coach. You authorized me to be the co-chair.
Yep. With great trepidation, I might add.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, that's good. It's good to be a little on edge.
Yeah.
So we did this thing together, and I asked you if we were doing this, and you told me I don't really have the authority to say yes, but my boss does. You'll have to convince her.
Yes.
Right. So we were able to eventually. She was on board with the idea of doing the first meeting.
Yep.
And we hadn't even really discussed that there was a second meeting, right? We kind of were doing this in line. It was a lot of improv.
Well, I mean, I did read the draft of your book that talked about, the open spaces bracketing, sort of a
90
8
day.
to 12 week experiment.
Yeah.
And so I had kind of the basic concepts that you were, talking about, but again, hadn't experienced it, didn't quite understand it,
Yeah.
and felt like the best way to internalize it was to do by trying.
Yeah. So we go into the first open space. We create. We get a group of people to create a theme.
Yes.
So we start to socialize the meeting pre-socialize it, and then
In a mysterious way, which was kind of cool, right? It was not really clear what was going on. There were little signs that would show up in the kitchen and in the men's room and the ladies' room about, come, we're going to talk about, how Agile in service to what, and that's all it said. So it created a lot of kind of whispering in the halls. What is this? Should I go?
Yeah.
What's it all about?
It created that sort of.
It was a buzz.
It got in their head.
It was a buzz.
Yeah. So we get to the meeting. I bring a friend in to facilitate because I don't feel I can be effective there. What are you thinking as you're sitting in the circle and the leader of the company's about 100 people at this point. There's probably about 90 people there, or 85.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We got an incredible turnout.
What are you thinking as you sit in the circle and you're listening to the facilitator open up the space? Well, especially the leader of the organization first standing up and saying what she says, and then the facilitator coming in. How was this feeling for you?
So initially, pretty anxious. So anxious driving into work that day, thinking, I'm going to go to this thing. What happens if it's me and 4 other folks, right? The invitation went out to 100 or so, and was very pleased to see a very high turnout, right? So that was kind of cool. A little bit anxious about, okay, how is this day going to go?
It's unscripted.
And unscripted, right?
Yeah.
Again, hadn't been through it before, didn't know. Facilitate. So my boss gets up and kind of just authorizes the event, which was very cool.
What do you mean by that? Let's drill into that for 60 seconds. What do you mean authorize the event, Frank?
Yeah. So she did an amazing job. She sort of stood up and said, "Hey, I don't know what's going to happen today. I haven't been through this either, but." I'm okay with experimentation, and I'm comfortable with this organization spending a day, and worst case scenario, we've lost a day and we ate a bunch of good food. Best case scenario is something wonderful comes out of it. So I'm glad you're here. I have no high expectations for what's going to come out of this, and so by saying those words, it kind of took a lot of the anxiety out of the room, because people feel like, even if we kind of bounce around the walls for 6 hours,
we're okay.
My boss is okay with it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by sort of authorizing the event. And then the facilitator gets up and explains how it's going to work. Talks about the different kind of guidelines, the law of 2 feet, and who's ever there is the right people, and and this and he said, I'm going to open it up, and I want people that are interested with the topic to come to the front of the room and write their topic or question on a piece of paper on a clipboard and put their name and hold it over their head, and then walk to this grid where we have the times in the different corners of the room and paste it on the grid. And then he walks off. And of course now another anxiety level where, great, what happens if there's crickets?
We're all sitting in a circle.
All sitting in a big circle.
Now the circle's empty. There's just markers and paper on the floor in the middle, right?
So we're in 3 or 4 concentric circles. Again, 100 or so people in this room.
Yeah.
He does this very loose guidelines, right? Spoke only really for a few minutes, and then wanders off. So again, there's all this.
Now what do we do?
Now what do we do, right? And so I'm thinking, God, stupid me, probably should have prepared a question ahead of time in case there's nobody standing up there to get this thing started. But I hadn't thought that through. In 30 seconds, nothing, right? So there's a little bit of, and then of course, first brave person gets up and walks up to the front and writes a phenomenally great topic, right? How do we do, I think it was, how do we do Agile across geographically diverse teams? Cool. And he walks up and sticks it on the board. And now a second person gets up and writes down another really cool topic. I think it was how do user experience and developers and QA work together in a cohesive way in an Agile framework. And now a line starts forming. and bam, 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 people are going to the front asking questions, and within 10 minutes, that
The grid?
5x5 matrix of topics was filled, and some people sort of had to go and sit back down again. So it was pretty cool to see that level of engagement, and the topics were really thoughtful, and kind of I knew they would lead to good discussion.
Yeah, and there was some cheering or some hooting
It was.
for some sessions, like you said.
Yeah, because some people, I mean, people started to get emboldened. I think one of the topics, somebody walked up and said, and again, don't forget, I'm in the room, my boss is in the room, there's other members of the leadership team in the room, and somebody, individual contributor, walks to the front and posed a topic. What would we be crazy not to do in the next 90 days?
That was a great topic.
That was a great topic, right? I mean, who would have thunk? And I actually ended up going to that session, and it was phenomenal. Like, I mean, so I think that one got some hooting and hollering because people were like, "Yeah, that's good for you. Great question."
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah.
And again, as the facilitator said, people voted with their feet. So you saw some sessions just a crowd of people. Other sessions could be a little less so, but in kind of lively conversation. So, yeah, it was not what I expected in a very positive way.
Yeah, well, that's one of the slogans, right? Be prepared.
Be prepared to be surprised. And I think that's how I actually ended the day. So at the end of the day, the facilitator called us all back together, put us back in the circle again, and kind of had a talking stick and asked us to sort of go around and, just say a couple of sentences of what we thought. And it sort of got to me, and I think that's what I said. At the beginning of the day, you said, be prepared to be surprised. And holy crap, was I. And, after everybody had finished speaking, it was a bit of it sounds corny to say, but we all got up and people started hugging each other, which was kind of a bizarro thing. I mean, we're not a super touchy-feely culture, but people clearly, had a great time, and a number of people came by to me to thank me for sort of sponsoring this and arranging it, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I was really pleasantly surprised.
Cool. All right. So we're feeling our way along. We're planning to have a second event. We haven't completely articulated that there'll be a second event, but as the first event ends, we socialize that idea. Hey, listen, this is going to happen again in 90 days or so, right? So how is your organization feeling, and how are you feeling as you go through this sort of 90-day, 100-day window between the two open spaces, realizing that you're going to have at it again, and that no matter how bad it gets, you're going to experience that sort of suspension of the normal rules of engagement for a day. How is that feeling for you, and how do you perceive the organization is feeling through that period?
Yeah, so we have a culture here where we're really okay with failure as long as we fail fast and learn from it, right? So that's kind of, it meshes really well with this. So with the concept of the second open space, it really time boxed the experiment. So people were much more open to trying things, knowing that worst that can happen is I wasted a period of time, but I probably got a lot of good learnings, and in fact, in that case, I wouldn't call it a waste at all. I'd call it highly valuable. So in my mind, setting that stake in the ground early that there's going to be another open space kind of really lashed with people that it's okay to try things as long as we sort of have a finite duration for the experiment. And secondly, much like exercising, you don't go to the gym once and say, "Yep, that's it, I'm good."
Right.
That this was going to be a part of our operating rhythm, a part of our culture, that we care deeply about self-improvement, and that good ideas come from everywhere. And so the fact that these were sort of going to be regular occurrences really reinforced to people that there's going to be a chance to keep getting better. And as new hires started to come on board, it was cool because the story started to being told, "Oh, you got to wait till this next open space thing is coming. Like, you haven't seen anything like it before." So now these people that are new to the organization are like, they're kind of intrigued, and I think that, again, it was some great stories being told about it because we knew another one was coming.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. In this Open Agile Adoption technique, leadership engages in storytelling over that 90-day period.
Yes.
Right? So not only that, but the people on the shop floor are telling stories about the open space. So How important do you think that is, and how nervous do you think people are coming out of the first open space? And how do the stories maybe calm them down?
So I think a couple things. Coming out of the first open space, people were now very curious to see what would happen to these proceedings. Right, lots of phenomenal ideas get generated. I think we were typing them up fast and furious that day, and true to form, we sent out the raw proceedings that night. But it was like a 20-page document of kind of stream of consciousness. So there was a fair bit of, okay, great, we had this really cool, energizing day, but now what's gonna come of it? And we did something that I thought was pretty cool, which was, a select set of us sat down with the proceedings and bucketed them into two lists. One list, which was the smaller list, which was what things in here, what suggestions really need the leadership team to help make happen, right? That might you might need more money or more resources or a change in
Permission.
some major